Let's jump right into it. Today's explainer is a strictly focused, detailed dive into an absolutely fascinating article by Mofano Yusuf Begtash. He offers this incredibly rich analysis of the human condition, specifically unpacking the timeless battle between our physical desires and our ego, and, crucially, where our soul actually fits into that whole equation. We're sticking faithfully to his text today to really understand our deepest internal struggles.
So, what is the real cause of the endless conflict within us? You know, that turmoil we feel practically every day? Begtash leans on ancient Syriac literary heritage to show us that this isn't just random everyday stress. No, it's a structural conflict. It's literally rooted in how we are built.
Section 1. Body, Ego, and Soul.
To really understand this inner war, Begtash points us back to a famous 13th century Syriac poem. Now, this poem brilliantly explored the clash between the body and the ego, but it actually left out a vital piece of the puzzle, the soul. Begtash argues, and this is absolutely key, that the conflict can only be resolved when the soul actively intervenes. Without the soul, there is absolutely no peace treaty. In ancient Syriac culture, there's a specific triad that forms the essential foundation of a human being. We have ruho, the soul, fağro, the body, and nafşo, the ego or self. As Begtash details, you aren't just a body, and you aren't just a mind. You're this intricate three-part system. What's really fascinating here is the dual nature of the ego, or nafşo. Begtash explains that on one hand, it's a vital life force, but on the other, it can be this negative, sin-driven ego. Left totally unchecked, it corrupts our natural harmony and literally creates a veil that hides the divine energy within us. It just completely disrupts our natural inner order. Section 2. Human Dignity and Authenticity. Here we see the profound connection between the soul and human dignity. Begtash defines the soul, the ruho, as the actual reflection and breath of God within us. That is what makes human dignity sacred. Because of this shared divine reflection, he emphasizes that any negative emotion, like jealousy, arrogance, or just wanting to dominate people, directly violates that sacred dignity. When we hurt others, we're basically distancing ourselves from true morality and our very core. This brilliantly illustrates a concept Begtash focuses on: horizontal love. He quotes the 4th century church father John Chrysostom, who said, "The smaller a brother is, the more Christ is present." It shows that valuing the most vulnerable people among us is the ultimate reflection of a healthy soul. Welcoming the powerful? Well, that's often just empty vanity. But serving the vulnerable is pure intent. It proves your soul is awake.
All right, Section 3. The pure gold of the soul. So, if the soul is this beautiful, divine reflection, how exactly does the ego mess it up? Begtash points out a huge, fundamental misalignment. The soul looks inward, right? Toward truth, beauty, and virtue. The ego, though, is entirely obsessed with the outside, with vanity, showmanship, and selfishness. The ego basically covers the true beauty of the soul with the mud of selfishness, actively blocking our highest life energy, which is love. Begtash has this perfect metaphor for it. He likens the soul to pure, flexible gold, completely free from worldly rust. But when the ego's selfish ambitions get mixed in, it's like adding cheap alloys to that pure gold. It hardens, it rusts, and it completely loses its grace. This is exactly why Begtash says the path of the soul is narrow and difficult. Maintaining that pure flexibility in a really rigid world requires immense humility. Next up, Section 4, the color of thoughts. To protect this pure gold, Begtash insists we have to closely examine the thoughts occupying our minds every single day. He cites the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. The soul is dyed with the color of its thoughts. It's a universal truth. If we don't want our inner world darkened, we have to actively avoid dark, negative thoughts. The soul literally takes on the hue of whatever we let our minds dwell on. The Syriac genius Abu Faraq takes this even further with a super vivid image. Think about a pot of food on a fire. As long as it's boiling, flies don't land on it. Begtash uses this to show that a highly active, spiritually boiling soul naturally repels the corruption of the ego and dirty thoughts. We literally have to keep our spiritual temperature high to keep the ego at bay. Moving to Section 5, the castle guard, ego. But what happens when we let that fire cool down? Bektash introduces this incredibly vivid metaphor. Picture the ego as a corrupt, heavily armed guard standing at the gates of your soul's castle. This guard deliberately locks the door. It starves the castle of new oxygen, fresh ideas, and transformational thoughts. And it will only open the gate if we paid a bribe, if we feed its selfish desires.
And what exactly do those bribes look like? Well, this corrupt guard is armed with arrogance, jealousy, prejudice, exploitation, flattery, and stereotypes. Bektash argues that instead of letting in truth and complementary logic, we end up feeding the guard these exact bribes because, honestly, we stroke our own vanity. This dynamic is the exact reason our hearts become so hard and agitated.
Section 6. Purification and Virtues. Breaking past this corrupt gatekeeper requires a radical inner cleansing. Bektash uses a powerful quote from Lebanese writer Mikhail Naimi, calling on us to literally unwrap the ego. We have to take off all those swaddling clothes of pride and prejudice. Bektash explains that only through this unmasking can we realign ourselves with divine understanding and actually find true peace. And this isn't some passive process. As the 10th century Syriac writer Mor Elio wrote, you have to start swiftly and bravely. Bektash highlights this to show that we must literally take an axe to the toxic hidden roots the ego has planted in our souls. You cannot negotiate with a corrupt guard. You have to bravely cut away its influence. Finally, Section 7, the growth of the soul. When we finally manage to tame that gatekeeper and clear out those dark roots, the soul is completely free to mature. Bektash points directly to the fruits of the Spirit from Scripture: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, to map out the ultimate reward. When the soul grows without the ego's suffocating mud, it produces these fruits. It builds a character driven by true compassion. So, the absolute crucial takeaway in Bektash's analysis is this: taming the ego allows the soul to grow. Those who do this reap a life of self-control and grace, completely free from the empty boasting the ego demands. The individual becomes a gracious force for good, actively building a healthy, trusting society, and seeing others as equals, not competition. As we wrap up this explainer and our deep dive into Bektash's profound analysis, I want to leave you with a somewhat uncomfortable but totally necessary question. How often do you actively bribe your own inner gatekeepers just to avoid the difficult work of spiritual growth? Thanks for taking this journey with us today. Keep asking those tough questions, keep examining your inner fortress, and we'll see you next time.